The company was holding an all-hands meeting when the general manager's microphone suddenly changed his voice. Company rule: anyone whose name is called will die. Colleagues looked at one another in confusion. Only the general manager sat there red-faced and furious. Maggie, Maggie, what's going on? A moment later, Maggie's bloodied head rolled to the center of the hall. Maggie was the general manager's office secretary and the one who set up the venue. She usually liked to flaunt her authority. So when we heard the general manager call her name, we were whispering among ourselves, ready to watch the show. But when her head suddenly appeared, everyone was stunned. In the vast conference room, it felt as if the sound of skulls rolling could be heard, leaving a trail of blood. Someone's dead. Someone let out a scream, whoever was started it, and the venue instantly erupted into chaos. My legs went weak. I barely avoided stepping on a colleague, and after we all rushed outside, I quickly called the police. 911 rang twice before someone picked up. My voice trembled as I hurriedly recited what had just happened, but a noisy clamor came through on the other end. Someone patted my shoulder. I turned around. It was my department colleague, Nancy, her face ashen. Jason. She seemed to remember something. Before she could say the second syllable, she clapped a hand over her mouth. Then, with a quaver in her voice, "Your call. How did it end up with me?" I stared at the phone in her hand, my mind a blank. Looking around, everyone else was also scrambling, trying various ways to contact the outside world. But they soon discovered that every method of communication failed to get past this floor of offices. Either calls were mystifyingly redirected to the hands of other colleagues present, or they sank without a trace, leaving no response. What on earth is going on? We froze for a moment, then kept running toward the exit. But we hadn't reached the reception yet when we saw the main doors completely jammed shut. People were desperately pushing and crowding. The ordinary double-glass doors, which normally gave way easily, now stood immovable like a wall of bronze and iron. "Open the door," the crowd shouted, cursing loudly. The receptionist cried as she frantically pressed the remote control, but the main door didn't respond at all. Someone grabbed a chair. With a clang, the two huge panes of glass that made up the main door were gone without a trace. "Everyone get out of the way." I hurriedly pulled Nancy close. An outside sales employee, holding a power drill he'd somehow found, was striding toward the door with a menacing air. But under everyone's gaze, the moment the drill touched the glass, the man's hand snapped back at a grotesque angle, and the drill let out a squeal as it pierced his brain. Blood flowed everywhere, but this time no one screamed. In everyone's eyes there was nothing but despair and terror. By now, everyone probably realized what was happening. And at that moment, the eerie voice from the microphone earlier slowly spoke again. "Welcome to the company Battle Royale. Please pay constant attention to company rules, and do not leave on your own, otherwise you will die." The panicked crowd dwindled to isolated sobs. Everyone held their breath, afraid of missing the only chance to survive. Company Battle Royale. Only by following company rules and completing work tasks can employees clock out and leave. Those who break the company rules in any round will die. Those who fail to complete work tasks die. Those who leave early without authorization die. The rules of each round automatically expire when the next round's work tasks are issued. Total company staff, 58 people. Currently on duty, 56 people. Good luck to everyone. Strive to be outstanding employees. The voice stopped. Every time it said die, I felt my head throb, as if someone were pounding on it. Nancy tugged at me, her expression plainly asking, "Is that true?" I nodded to her. Though I still hadn't fully grasped the situation, the two of them had just died horribly right in front of us. And the number of on-duty employees it mentioned obviously meant those who were still alive. Nobody wanted to be the next, so everyone fell utterly silent, waiting for the work task to be announced. Work task 1. Be a model employee who follows the rules. Company rule. All employees must sit at their workstations within 3 minutes and remain at their workstation for the next 60 minutes without leaving. Note: no more than one employee may occupy a single workstation at the same time, otherwise you will die. When the first work task was announced, Everyone breathed a collective sigh of relief. Just that simple. I could even hear someone quietly gloating and whispering. Fortunately, everyone in our company, including the field staff, has an assigned seat, so there was no scramble for places. In less than a minute, the crowd that had been clustered at the door had all taken their seats at their own workstations. Nancy's desk was diagonally opposite mine. We stared at each other across the table. No one knew what would happen next. The office quickly became so silent you could hear a pin drop. But something in my chest kept nagging me. Such a simple task felt incongruous with the bloody scene from moments before. At that moment, a swish-swish sound came from a distance. I looked up, and to my surprise, there was a cleaner at the office entrance, sweeping the floor as if she had always been there. She wore the building's janitorial uniform and kept her head down, her features hidden from view. Because our company's cleaning was outsourced to the property management, that wasn't surprising. But how did she get in? She walked around, so why was she completely unharmed? I couldn't make heads or tails of it. Obviously, others had thought of the same question. The once silent office area began to fill with hushed whispers. Could it be that because the cleaner isn't one of our company's employees, she isn't bound by the rules? Everyone seemed to catch a glimmer of hope for survival. Those nearest to the cleaner even called out softly, "Auntie," begging her to hurry outside and call the police. But the cleaner seemed as if she hadn't heard it all, silently continuing her work. I watched her mechanical movements from afar, my heart starting to pound. I couldn't shake the feeling that her appearance was out of the ordinary. Could it be? A thought slowly rose in my mind, and before long the next scene confirmed my suspicion. The cleaner swept up to an employee and jabbed at the man's chair with her broom, signaling him to move. Probably because such scenes were so routine, the man instinctively slid over a bit. But at that moment, the cleaner, who had been looking down, suddenly lifted her head. Only then did I see clearly. Her face had nothing but a huge grin stretched to her cheeks and a pair of blood-red eyes. The cleaner's neck shot out like a man-eating plant, the gaping maw revealing jagged teeth. The moving employee was terrified and froze. He barely let out a scream before the cleaner snapped his head off in one bite. Blood sprayed across the floor, and everyone stood stunned by the lightning-fast change. The girl at the neighboring desk cried and screamed, hurling everything on her table at the cleaner, but it didn't react. Like a merciless harvesting machine, it simply kept advancing. The girl, terrified, couldn't help but scramble to her feet and run, but barely 2 steps out her head erupted into a mist of blood, and the headless body crashed heavily to the ground. In the office area, the relaxed mood that had been present when the task was announced had completely vanished. I finally understood the immense peril hidden behind what had seemed like a simple task. They couldn't leave their workstations, but there were deadly interfering factors. In the cleaner's eyes, each workstation seemed to have a narrow boundary. Even if a chair touched that edge, the cleaner would transform and bite to death whoever violated it. Standing up was even less allowed. Doing so meant immediate mission failure. So, what other options were there? Behind the girl stood a fat man. At this moment, I could clearly see him trembling. But he gripped the table with both hands, teeth clenched, as if prepared to fight to the death. The janitor walked up behind him and began prodding his chair with the broom. The fat man didn't dare to turn his head, his face stuffed and bright red. Thud, thud, thud. The broom struck the chair with increasing force. After only a few blows, the chair had been shoved tight against the table. But the cleaner still didn't stop. With each subsequent strike, I couldn't tell how much force the fat man was taking, but the flesh on his body visibly trembled, and his face showed a look of pain. After who knows how many hits, the fat man finally spat a mouthful of blood, and the chair crashed to the ground. I turned my head, unable to bear watching the scene of him being consumed by the cleaner. At the same time, my heart was already unbearably tense. No matter what we did, nothing would work. Wasn't this task just asking us to wait to die? Behind a row of desks where the fat guy sat was our spot. Nancy, who sat diagonally opposite me, had long since gone deathly pale. 60 minutes. I didn't know how long it had been, but I was certain that time would be more than enough for the cleaner to finish me off. The cleaner had already turned toward our row. The first was Tom, the coworker sitting next to Nancy. Tom's face was written full of despair, both hands clamped hard on the tabletop, as if trying to emulate the fat man's final resistance. But perhaps from straining too hard, his chair slid backward a little. In that instant, the cleaner froze, studying him, tilting her head up, and the next moment she would reach forward again and bite Tom to death. I held my breath, my heart nearly stopping. Could the colleague I was closest to really die in front of me like this? But at that moment, Tom immediately reached out, pulled him back, and returned him to the table. The janitor's transformation, incredibly, also stopped. She returned to her usual state and kept cleaning. Tom panted heavily. Though he had escaped death, it was clear he had no idea how long he would live. But I stared fixedly at everything that had just happened, and suddenly a spark flared in my mind. The chair can move. The janitor's change seemed to have a 5-second delay. As long as she returned in front of her workstation within those few seconds, she would revert to her original state. I carefully recalled the rule that had been announced earlier. No workstation may have more than one employee at the same time. I didn't understand what that sentence meant before. Now I do. You must not leave your workstation, but it never said you had to stay at your own, right? There was no time to think further. I immediately shouted across to Nancy and Tom. Move! Nancy, go to the workstation behind you now. She won't kill you within 5 seconds. Nancy understood what I meant almost immediately. Although there was no way to prove this method would work yet, there was no other choice now. We had to throw everything into it. She gritted her teeth and pushed hard. The floor gave a squeal as the chair slid just into the workstation behind her. 1 second before the cleaner finished her transformation, Nancy finally sat down trembling at the new desk. The cleaner paused and seemed to cast her a cold glance. Then, as expected, went back to her routine and continued cleaning. Everyone's anxiety finally eased. I kept shouting at Tom, telling him to move to Nancy's desk right away. Tom didn't hesitate and slipped past the cleaner once more. It worked. We finally found a way to crack the first task. Like playing a sliding puzzle, everyone moved in tacit coordination, shifting one by one to clear the path the cleaner had to walk. Still, a few people, nervous, slipped into the gap between the 2 rows of desks. If you don't get it right the first time and try to adjust your position slowly afterward, it'll definitely be too late. The others could only watch in despair as he was devoured. Some, paralyzed by fear, acted too soon. When 2 people occupied one workstation, the result was that both would die. The cleaner finally finished tidying the office area and left our site. Work task 1 concluded. Congratulations to all the disciplined employees. Current on-duty staff, 39. Hearing the eerie voice again, those who had survived couldn't hide their excitement and let out a long breath. I shifted my sitting position slightly to relax my nerves, but still didn't dare to stand up. The second work task hadn't been announced yet. I wasn't sure whether the rules of the previous one had actually ended. That round wasn't really hard once you found the method, but nearly 20 people still died. Aside from our positional advantage in the office area, the real reason we could pass was that someone had previously met with misfortune. I quietly noted that lesson and kept my ears pricked. Before long, the second work task was announced. Work task 2. Be a well-rounded, all-around good employee. Company rules. All employees will be randomly reassigned to new positions in groups of 3. Please confirm your new position via email and report to your post within 5 minutes and satisfy the client. Note, no member of a new work team may return to their original post or they will die. As soon as the announcement ended, the sound of keyboards clicking filled the air. I nervously opened my email, and sure enough, there was a reassignment message from HR. Jason, employee number 00078, reassigned to new position, Operations Department. A ripple of voices soon broke out through the company. Some stared at the screen like statues, while others hugged each other in exhilaration. The final requirement of this round was to satisfy the client, so the difficulty of the new positions was crucial. Everyone treated it like opening a blind box. I saw the person who walked into finance wearing an expression of despair, while the young man heading for reception couldn't hide his smile. To me, the business department was a result that was neither good nor bad. It wasn't far from my previous workspace. There was still some overlap. My other two companions happened to be Nancy and Tom, so we were reasonably lucky. Partnering with people you know at least makes your coordination much better. We had only just sat down when a trembling voice came from the company entrance. "Hello. Hello. May I help you with something?" The entire office fell into a deathly silence. I followed the sound with my eyes. Standing opposite the three receptionists was a bent old man. A client had arrived. The old man let out a strange, hair-raising chuckle. But he didn't answer the receptionist's question immediately. Instead, he took out 2 cards. I couldn't make out what was written on the cards. Only saw from a distance the 3 of them frown and discuss for a while, then point to one. The old man took the card back, glanced at the 3 of them, and finally spoke. He asked the receptionist 3 questions. The first was, "What is your company's name?" The receptionist trembled as she gave her answer. The old man smiled, made no protest, but for his second question he asked, "Is your general manager here?" The 3, who hadn't yet had a chance to smirk, immediately looked at one another. The strange voice earlier had only said there were 39 people still alive, without specifying who, so for them, it was a 50-50 chance. The 3 of them began to stammer, and the old man raised his voice and asked again. From where I stood, I couldn't make out the old man's features, but I could see clearly that his body was changing. I immediately realized that if we answered wrongly, the result would be the same as what had just happened to the cleaner. "He's not here." The receptionist finally took a gamble before the old man could ask his third question. Fortunately, they guessed right, and the old man's silhouette soon returned to normal. But before they could catch their breath, the old man asked the third question. "So now, who's in charge of the company?" The entire office inhaled as one. The probability in the previous question was still considerable, but this question, how on earth was anyone supposed to answer it? When teams formed, it was pandemonium. It was impossible for anyone to have noted down all the living people. The old man asked 3 times in a row. Each time his voice was more terrifying than the last. Seeing that he had become completely inhuman, I heard the front desk finally speak up. "Vice President, the Vice President is in charge now." The old man's figure did not return, and a sinister, eerie laugh escaped his mouth once more. Then his other hand rose. "Deputy General? Then whose head is this? How dare you lie to me? You people are utterly incompetent." The sound of a heavy object hitting the ground rang out. From the reception desk came a single, agonized scream. Then it was as if the sound had been suddenly cut off. Earlier, I had been intensely envious of Tom at the front desk, but now his face was deathly pale. Many others in the office area wore looks of lingering dread, but I never thought the front desk was a lucky position. The ones who meet the clients first are the most likely to step on a landmine. What I needed to do now was to gather whatever lessons I could. The next set of positions was in the pantry, and the old man again gave them 2 cards to choose from. But this time, after they made their choices, the old man didn't ask any questions. Instead, he demanded that they provide a cup of pu'er tea. I hurriedly wrote this situation down on paper and began to analyze it. So, I guess that the content on the cards concerned the form of the tasks, and that answering questions was not the only option. As for the client's request this time, I'm well aware that the company pantry only stocks coffee and bottled water, no tea at all, let alone any pu'er. I went on to write, his request would come with obstacles. But the people in the pantry seemed to be in luck this time. Shortly after, I heard an excited voice from within, saying there happened to be some high-grade pu'er on the table intended for a client. Everyone was taken aback. Could it be that this time, the goddess of fortune was on their side? But in just a moment, the delight turned to terror. The man bolted to the table, grabbed the tea leaves, and as he turned, he suddenly dissolved into a spray of blood. My heart skipped 2 frantic beats before I remembered the rule note. No member of a newly formed work group may return to their original workstation. That group had, of course, failed. When the old man came out of the tea room, I had already crossed out the word obstacle on the paper and written trap in its place. His next direction was toward the large open office where we were. When he took the card out again and showed it to the colleagues not far ahead of us, I finally saw the contents on the card clearly, and it matched my earlier guess. As I listened to the old man's conversation with them, I kept summarizing and revising on the paper. 1. The old man will give each position 2 choices: answer questions or meet a requirement. 2. There are 3 questions, each one doubles in difficulty, and the third question requires mastery of every current detail. 3. There's only one requirement, but it is related to the new position. 4. During execution, the requirement will inevitably include a condition that is currently hard to satisfy, and its solution will contain a trap. 5. For each question or request, the client's waiting time is limited, and if it is repeated a third time, the time is up. 6. The maximum waiting time for each question is about 30 seconds, and the maximum waiting time for each request does not exceed 1 minute. I handed these points to Nancy and Tom to read through, and we discussed the choices we were about to face. After a short while, the previous group finally came through, their voices stifling excitement after passing. But we couldn't be happy because next, it was our turn. After a brief discussion, given how slim the chances were of guessing the answer to the third question correctly, we ultimately decided to choose to comply with the requirements. Now that we were stationed in the business department, I frantically tried to recall the work they normally did: client liaison, contract signing, printing, and stamping. Those should be their main tasks in the company. To save time, I had Nancy boot up the computer, find a contract template, and told Tom to get the printer ready. I had a hunch that the client's request would most likely have something to do with the contract. Fortunately, my gamble paid off. I want a copy of the contract signed. When the old man's sour, sinister voice sounded, we were delighted as if hearing celestial music. Nancy's fingers flew over the keyboard, and Tom kept confirming the detailed clauses with the old man. They could all be traps he'd set for us. We'd already studied every loophole many times during our earlier preparations. The 1-minute countdown ticked incessantly in my mind. We finally finished all the steps before the client grew impatient, just as the printer clacked and spat out the printed contract. But the old man's frame, he had still grown larger. Why isn't it stamped? He slammed the contract onto the desk, his expression terrifying. Nancy and Tom went pale in an instant. It's over, Zhang, in finance. But at that moment, I confidently opened the drawer. From previous experience I compiled, there was actually one more item I hadn't written down. 8. The traps hidden in client requests are very likely things everyone else hasn't prepared for. So earlier I had seen the contract stamp in the sales department drawer, but I didn't take it out. I was just betting I could fool the old man. When they saw the stamp, the two of them turned their sorrow into joy, and I didn't hesitate to press it down. But the old man still only let out a horrifying, strange laugh. A seal without ink won't do. My heart sank. I glanced at the contract. Where the stamp should be, it was a blank space. How could this be? I pressed down hard on it 2 more times, but still there wasn't a single mark on the paper. I panicked for a moment because I hadn't dared to take the seal out before, so I hadn't tried it. But aren't seals like this supposed to come pre-inked? Rule 8 failed. The old man's mouth curled even more exaggeratedly. Beads of sweat slid down my forehead. Suddenly, Tom exclaimed with joy, "I have an ink pad in my drawer." Peril surrounded us. There was no time to think. Tom was already lunging for his desk. I exhaled half a breath and stole a quick glance at the old man. But a sudden thunderclap of realization struck my mind. No, this isn't right. I saw an expectant look in his eyes. It's a trap. When everyone suddenly believes they've found the answer, they often overlook other risks. Snapping back, I grabbed Tom, who had already reached the table. No, you can't go back. Just like the trap in the break room, no member of the new work group may return to their original workstation. Tom registered it now, too, his face turning pale once more. Going back means death, and even if we try to go back and find it, there surely wouldn't be enough time. How can there be a seal without ink? The old man's second reproach escaped him. His whole body, save for his head, had lost any human shape. Nancy covered her mouth, her face full of despair. I scratched my head, still clueless about how to make amends. Within a few breaths, Tom seemed to have made up his mind. A heroic light flickered in his eyes. "Jason, you saved my last life. You all must survive." The old man's head began to swell. Just as Tom was about to sacrifice himself, I suddenly thought of something. I snatched the utility knife from the desk and sliced my palm in a flash. Blood dripped onto the tabletop. There was no time to feel the pain. Before the old man could finish his third interrogative, I used my blood to complete the seal. The old man's smile froze. That enormous mouth slowly shut, and he quickly returned to human form. He picked up the contract on the table, sneered for a few seconds, and finally left slowly. Only then did the three of us slump into our chairs, gasping for breath. At last, we'd survived another round. Work task 2 completed. Congratulations to all well-rounded employees. There are currently 21 employees on duty. Almost half of them had died again. But this time the voice gave us no time to breathe. A new work task was issued immediately. Work task 3, be a good employee who strives to climb higher. Company rule. All employees are required to proceed to the conference room immediately for a meeting. Attention! There are only 9 seats in the conference room. Once fully occupied, the conference room door will close. Those who do not obtain meeting qualification will die. As soon as the voice finished, the office erupted into a scramble of hurried footsteps. What I feared most had happened. In the first 2 rounds, everyone was still at peace, but this time the logic changed completely. 21 people, 9 seats, no other rules or constraints. Each person's survival equals standing on the corpses of others. To stay alive, the madness in people's hearts would be amplified without limit. Sure enough, no sooner had we stood up than a chair came flying at us. Having barely ducked out of the way, I looked up to see several burly young men charging past from the side like wild bulls. The corridor leading to the conference room was already a complete mess. People shoved and grabbed at one another, even throwing punches and kicks, all desperate to get in first. The whole company had turned into a massive battlefield. Tom and I aren't the brawny type. At the moment, we could only hunch over, shielding the Friley or Nancy, carefully weaving through the crowd and slowly making our way toward the conference room. The throng in the corridor gradually thinned, and we finally reached the outer hall by the conference room door. I had expected even fiercer fighting inside, but when I saw the scene clearly, I was taken aback. The conference room was deathly quiet. Of the 9 chairs, not a single person sat in any of them. Those frantic figures from before had all vanished. I noticed a few silhouettes still huddled in a corner not far from the doorway, faces tense, yet not daring to take a single step inside. What was going on? Sensing instinctively that something was wrong here, I grabbed the other 2 and slowed our pace. At that moment, a few more people appeared from the other side and rushed in a panic. Only then did I see clearly. The instant they stepped into the conference room, the floor beneath them suddenly vanished, and before a single scream could escape, they were swallowed by the endless chasm beneath the floor. Those who arrived afterward witnessed the scene, and the crowd finally regained its composure. The good news now was that the most reckless and impulsive groups from before had already been devoured by the abyss, and the number of people remaining was already almost the same as the number of seats. So for the moment, they didn't have to witness any more life-or-death struggles. But how exactly were they supposed to get through this final, murderous stretch? From the conference room door to the nearest chair was at least 5 or 6 meters, an impossible leap for any person. Everyone clustered at the main door, helpless and panicked. How about we don't go at all? There's no time limit on this mission, anyway. A suggestion rose from the crowd and was quickly echoed by several people. Yeah, I remember the first voice said employees could only leave after work. Maybe if we just survive until the end of the shift, it'll all be over. I raised my hand to check my watch. As he said, there really wasn't much time left. But would it really leave such a big loophole for us? I stared intently at the stretch of road before us that seemed to devour people. Pondering, a little while ago, I kept feeling I'd missed something. The earlier proposals and guesses had relaxed many. Everyone consoled themselves, as if this were the true purpose of the round. Yet before long, we began to smell a strange odor. Soon, the air grew scorching hot. Fire! It's on fire! Someone screamed. I turned back. At some point, aside from the hall we were standing in, everything around us had already been engulfed in flames. Those who have lived this long are all meticulous thinkers. So no matter how the fire started, everyone realized this was our final countdown. The flames advanced toward the conference room with a steady, rhythmic progression. Waves of heat rolled in, like incessant urgings pushing us onward. The safe zone and the time left to us were visibly shrinking, and the crowd's attention turned back toward the conference room. There was no choice left. I closed my eyes and tried desperately to replay the earlier scene, hunting for any clue that might betray a flaw. At that moment, Nancy suddenly whispered, "I think I've figured out its pattern." Everyone's eyes turned toward her. Nancy took a deep breath. "I need to verify it again." At that moment, she grabbed a chair and threw it through the doorway. The floor vanished again. But the instant the chair fell, I caught sight of something flashing on the other side of the floor. Many people noticed this too and pointed toward the other side. Nancy conducted the experiment a second time. She had Tom and her pick up identical chairs. After counting down 3, 2, 1, they both tossed them toward opposite sides of the floor. An astonishing miracle occurred. This time, the chairs did not fall. So the floor panels are fake, and beneath them there's an invisible support, like a seesaw. When someone runs across, one end drops and the other rises. No wonder someone took a few extra strides just now, and only fell after bursting past the others. So if we pair up people of similar weight and cross slowly 2 by 2, we could get across. Everyone immediately drew that conclusion, faces lighting up with relief. But when it actually came time to go in, no one wanted to be the first to try. "I'll go." While everyone hesitated, I thought for a moment and stepped forward first. The others looked at me, equal parts hopeful and anxious. "Jason, I'll go with you. We should weigh about the same." Tom stepped forward too, his expression resolute. We tore down a curtain to use as a final layer of protection, each grabbing an end, then shakily stepped onto the floor. The people outside watched us, not even daring to breathe. The fire was getting closer. I couldn't tell whether the sweat on my forehead was from the heat or from nerves. But we could only force ourselves to stay calm, murmuring 1, 2, 3, and stepping forward together. The first step, success. The floor really hadn't given way. I only felt a slight tremor under my feet before quickly regaining my balance. Step 2, step 3. After 8 or 9 steps, the chair was finally within arm's reach. Tom and I exchanged a glance. I held up a number with my hand, and we leapt at the same time. Once we were seated, we couldn't help but let out a few deep breaths. The ground stopped shaking. The long-missed sense of solid footing returned underfoot. Looking out toward the conference room again, we saw that by the time we were halfway there, they had already paired off and were getting ready. Nancy and another girl made up the second pair. The rest were all men. The blaze was less than a meter from the last person, and those behind were frantically urging them on. That's also why I decided to be the first to try just now. Among the remaining people, there are only 2 girls, so Nancy should still be able to pair up and make it through. But the male colleagues, it's not so certain for them. Putting aside who goes first or last, I'm afraid that in the end, even forming pairs might spark conflicts again. Anyway, besides this plan, there was only waiting to die, so it was better to gamble everything on one desperate try. Sure enough, as the girls passed, the 3 pairs behind them began to shove again. Especially the last 2 pairs, where not even who got a seat could be guaranteed. The third team barely made it across the man-eating floor, and the brutal scene that had started before replayed once more. The fourth pair were shoved by the people behind them as they stepped onto the floor, and when the 2 fell, they grabbed the ones who had pushed them. 3 seats were left empty in the end. No one could sit down anymore. Those of us who remained sat there, all watching what had just happened with lingering dread. But in the end, none of us said anything. We had long since grown used to the madness of human nature. I could only be glad that I had chosen to try first. The main gates slowly closed, and the heat in the air gradually faded, as if what had come before had been an illusion. Work task 3 completed. Congratulations to all you hard-working, upwardly striving employees. Currently 6 staff members remain on duty. The voice spoke without emotion, but no one felt at ease. I had a premonition that this battle royale was finally approaching its end. Yet, after 3 rounds, the test of human nature had grown deeper with each one. Who knew what harsher scenes awaited next? Several wary glances swept across the room, each betraying tension, perhaps thinking the same thing I was. But strangely, for a long while after that, no more voices came through. The wall clock was about to strike the end of the workday. Whispers rippled through the silent conference room. Could it be that we really just wait here until it's time to leave? At that moment, the conference room door was suddenly pushed open. Then a figure we had never expected appeared, and in an instant everyone was dumbfounded. Well, everyone, all here, huh? The pot-bellied general manager walked in, a practiced smile on his face, and sat down directly in the main seat that happened to be vacant. That just now was merely the company's latest test. What you witnessed was simply the company's newest black technology combined with virtual reality. Congratulations on becoming the final winners. Tomorrow, I will promote and reward each of you. The general manager glanced at the wall clock. Now, time's about right. Everyone, you may disperse. When his words fell, the offhand tone made it impossible to tell whether he was lying. But no one stood. Everyone's eyes flickered. They remained seated, saying nothing. Those still alive now were all nimble of body and cautious of mind. In the second round of questions, the client clearly asked whether the general manager was still present and received a definite answer. So, if one had to bet on trusting the client or trusting the general manager before us, I don't think anyone would choose the latter. I don't know what exactly is sitting beside me at this moment, but I'd rather plan for the worst than be easily beguiled by it. Sure enough, when the general manager saw that none of us moved, he started to explode. Did any of you even hear what I just said? Get out. Now, get the hell out, all of you. His tone grew more intense, as if barely containing his rage, and his body swelled larger and larger with each heavy fist he slammed onto the table. He shifted into an old man's grotesque form, stretching out a long neck that swept over our heads like a janitor. Spittle dripped onto the tabletop, his venomous gaze roaming over each of us. Suddenly, his huge mouth opened, and the colleague sitting at the far end could no longer hold back. He screamed and leapt to his feet. But just as he dodged the giant maw, the man's body was instantly swallowed by the man-eating floor. I sat rigidly in my seat, staring straight ahead. Yes, the new task hadn't been announced yet, so the old rules still applied. The cannibal corridor remained. Everyone wore the same tense expression, afraid they'd be next. But the most terrifying thing happened. The general manager's voice sounded in my ear. "Jason, didn't you hear that?" I trembled. The huge mouth drew closer, almost covering half my head. But I still didn't move. The only thought in my mind now was that I couldn't believe there was no way out of this round. Before, no matter how tricky the questions, the monster would never eat someone without reason. So I wagered it was trying to scare me. Time ticked by. Each second felt like a year, yet I sat there unmoving, resolute. At last, the darkness before my eyes receded. The giant head left me. I felt utterly drained, my body soaked through with sweat, but my performance had shown that the general manager was all bluff. Seeing that he could no longer deceive anyone, the general manager finally snapped back to himself and stormed away in fury. As he pushed open the conference room door, a tongue of flame instantly engulfed him. I glanced at him one last time. The corner of his mouth curled up, revealing one final, eerie smile. With a click, the wall clock announced the end of the workday. But after the earlier episode, no one dared move. The voice sounded again at last. "Dear outstanding employees, I am pleased that you have entered the final task phase. From the little performance just now, it's obvious everyone here is already comrades of resolute will. Now, the final task. Make your last choice, leave with vast wealth, or remain here forever. Company rules. Every employee will receive a 10 million yuan advance bonus, and before each person, there will be 2 golden spheres. The golden spheres represent two choices, life or death. Please make your selection within 3 minutes. Those who choose life will bring everyone an opportunity for life. Those who choose death will bring everyone a double punishment of death. Note, the death penalty will strike at random, but those who chose death are given priority exemption. If someone chooses death but ultimately survives, their bonus will be doubled first. The remaining bonus will be split equally among the survivors after the total amount is deducted by the doubled bonus. Have a pleasant game, and by the way, don't trust anyone. When the voice finished, we were all baffled. These rules were unusually complicated, but it was clear this was the ultimate test of human nature. As if to prove the prize money really existed, we all soon received a bank message on our phones. 10 million yuan, it really had been deposited. At that moment, everyone's faces showed expressions of disbelief. The final round. There's even something this good? Isn't this simple? Everyone just choose life, and with 10 million it's enough for us to spend. But my face couldn't brighten. Just like the voice said at the end, do not trust anyone. This was a disguised game of Russian roulette. The difference was that we loaded the bullets ourselves, and the rules said whoever loaded the bullets could fire last. On the surface, our optimal solution was indeed for everyone to choose life, for each of us to walk away with 10 million. But can anyone really trust that? Not even Tom and Nancy. I couldn't trust them 100%. None of us knew the true choices of the others. And choosing death not only increased one's own chance of survival, but also promised at least double the reward. It was impossible that nobody would be tempted. If even 3 people chose death, the pistol would be loaded to the brim with bullets, and everyone here would die, walking away with not a single cent. That was the greatest trap of this round. My mind raced. Although everyone at the table kept insisting they'd choose life, their hesitant movements betrayed their true thoughts. It's not that I don't love money, but my first goal is to stay alive. What, exactly, would maximize the chances of survival? Faces around the table grew grave, hands faltering with indecision. It seemed many people had already discovered the traps as well. But the cruelest thing about this round was that the more people knew where the traps lay, the more they would choose them to seek benefit and avoid harm. Discussion was utterly useless now, because no one could possibly trust anyone else. I buried my head in thought, endlessly calculating various possibilities on my phone. In the end, just when everyone seemed to have made up their minds, I suddenly stood up holding a golden orb. Ladies and gentlemen, the choice I hold in my hand is death. The moment the words left my mouth, the expressions on everyone's faces shifted from shock to panic, then to anger. How can you do this? Didn't we all agree to choose life? Damn it, when you're about to die, what use is money? You taking it into the coffin? A flood of objections washed over my eardrums. Even Nancy and Tom beside me shot puzzled looks. The loudest was the man diagonally across from me. If Tom on my side hadn't remained silent, I wouldn't have been surprised if he had leapt up and come at me right then. But I kept my face unchanged and continued. I believe everyone has already thought of it. The worst outcome of this round is that 3 people choose die, in which case all previous efforts will be for nothing. Right now, besides me, there's one remaining slot to choose die. I can analyze the possible outcomes for you. First, if someone else chooses die, everyone who chose live will fail, and among those who chose die, only one can survive. Between us, one person would take the 50 million prize, but the survival probability for those who chose die is only 50%. Second, if only I choose die and all of you choose live and 3 people ultimately survive, I will get 30 million and you will still get 10 million. But aside from me, your probability of survival will still be 50%. I thought I had made my meaning clear. Now that I have taken one of the die slots, the remaining people's chance of survival is only 50% whether they choose live or die. I believe that by now money might not be the most important thing. Everyone hesitated because choosing die could greatly increase their odds of survival. And I had evened out that probability. But after a moment, the man opposite started shouting again. Why do you get to take the death slot? If it's only a 50% chance, why can't we take a gamble? I smiled. You can take a gamble, of course others can too, and then the result will be that we all stay here forever. The man's face went pale. He panted and glared at me fiercely. Also, I can guarantee this. Of the 30 million I receive, I will give 20 million to compensate the families of the two who die, so we'll still each get 10 million. Who trusts your promise? If you swap with me, I could promise the same. I ignored him. There was no point in arguing now. The only way to make a decision was to take away any choice. At last, after a moment of stalemate, the voice sounded again. Time's up. Now please make your final choice. All eyes fixed on me. I shrugged, put on a blasé act, and released the golden ball. Everyone held their breath, but the voice gave no hint at that moment. After a few seconds, the voice urged again, and only then did Nancy slowly get to her feet. Jason, I believe you can do what you say. I choose life. She dropped her golden ball. Then Tom, with a look as if he wanted to say something but held back, glanced at me and also dropped his golden ball. The girl across sighed. Jason, you were the one who helped us be the first to try just now. If I die, consider it me repaying the life you saved, but don't forget what you yourself said. Finally, the man across from me, the one who had been butting heads with me the whole time. His eyes were still hesitant. I stared at him, my gaze not flinching in the slightest. Anyway, the odds of living are 50-50. Either you take a gamble, you have a half chance to win 50 million, or I guarantee you 10 million. You choose. The final golden ball was finally dropped. We all waited tensely for the result. Voting has ended. The final result is 5 votes to live. Congratulations to the outstanding employees. Now, you may take your bonuses and leave. The conference room door creaked open slowly. Outside, there was no raging fire, and even the bodies that had once littered the ground had vanished. At the conference table, after a brief silence, cheers of survivors erupted. Nancy clung to another girl, crying tears of joy. Tom's face was flushed with excitement as he slapped my shoulder. Jason, you really did it. I knew it. Believing in you was the right choice. Only the man opposite showed a complicated expression. After hesitating for a long time, he finally gave me a small nod, then rose up tremblingly. We took our first steps cautiously. The rules on the floor were gone, and the voice was gone. I walked up to the company reception. The main door was already wide open. We didn't wait any longer and hurried into the elevator. Only after stepping out of the building and seeing the familiar bustle of traffic did I finally feel that I had truly survived. The evening sun of dusk fell on me. I felt as if I'd just had a terrifying, interminable dream. But when I opened my mobile banking app, the numbers inside told me that everything I'd experienced a moment ago had been real. Now, I had no desire to probe or investigate what exactly had happened. I just wanted to go home and sleep soundly. I don't know how long I slept. I woke in the middle of the night, groggy, and noticed my phone was lit. I picked it up. There was a strange text message on it. Mr. Jason, would you like to participate in the Battle Royale game again? Game rules. Anyone who does not reply within 3 seconds will be considered as having agreed to participate. I screamed and woke up from the dream. The end.